And as always, it's so nice to see so many of you joining us from the FPS, but also from lots of other ceramic societies, decorative art societies, students, scholars from across the world, from Zimbabwe to India to the US to Europe. So a huge welcome to everyone. This evening, we're delighted to introduce Dr. Christian Lechelt, who'll be speaking to us about Schloss Fürstenberg and exhibiting manufactories past and present. And I know he's been working on some really innovative approaches, so we're really looking forward to that. Dr. Christian Lechelt joined the museum Schloss Fürstenberg in 2015 as the project manager for the reinstallation, and since 2016 has served as its director. From 2012 to 2015, he worked as an assistant curator at the Porzellan Museum in Selb. Having studied art history at the University of Cologne, he received his master's degree there and then received a doctorate PhD from the University of Hamburg. Since 2017, he has served as the editor for Keramos, and since 2018 has been the vice president, and I'm trying to pronounce this, of Gesellschaft der Keramikfund. Some sincere apologies for that. I should have checked that one as well in advance, Christian. But we're so hugely delighted to welcome you this evening. And we've got a fantastic turnout, almost 240 people tuning in. So over to you, and thank you so much for coming to speak with us today.
Oh, thank you, Caroline, for this lovely introduction. And yeah, it's so overwhelming to see so many people from all over the world attending tonight. A warm welcome here from right now freezing cold and snowy central Germany. And my greatest thanks to Caroline and especially Felix for helping with technique and organizing this program. So let's get straight to the point. And yeah, the Fürstenberg porcelain manufactory was founded officially in January 1747 at the behest of Duke Charles I of Brunswick-Lüneburg, who ordered the manufactory to be located in the former hunting lodge of the Dukes of Brunswick in Fürstenberg, north of the River Weser. It's halfway between Kassel and Hanover. And in those times, it was the most miserable part of Charles' dominion. But today, the remote location provides us with a picturesque landscape, as you can see here. The story itself had started a few years earlier when in 1744, the porcelain painter and self-proclaimed arcanist Johann Christoph Glaser introduced himself to the Duke's court in Wolfenbüttel. Glaser came from the Hausmaler workshop of Friedrich Metsch in Bayreuth in southern Germany, well known amongst scholars and collectors for the decoration of Meissen porcelain in a distinctive style. Glaser's experiments might well have started in Wolfenbüttel and led to anticipate success, so he was transferred to Schloss Fürstenberg to continue his work and to install and sustain a production process. The castle was chosen because it was abandoned for nearly 100 years, and the region was in deep need of any support to raise its economic development. Glaser was supervised and assisted by Johann Georg von Langen, the Duke's head forester, who acted as Fürstenberg's first director and who had to cope with the struggles of years of futile experimentation. In anticipation, I show you this detail of a Fürstenberg tabatière made for von Langen and showing his coat of arms surrounded by symbols of porcelain making in a delicate rocaille frame. Top right, there's a depiction of Schloss Fürstenberg already transformed into a manufactory. A charming detail on the left is Kronos, the god of time and fate, watering a blooming plant. 3 years after founding, the first successful firing took place in January 1750. But this was a one-hit wonder. As it turned out, Glaser was everything but an arcanist. In fact, he was a fraud, like so many others, wandering around in Central Europe, making fools of their respective sponsors who were desperately longing to possess a porcelain manufactory. But Glaser was smart enough to fool the Duke and the director, von Langen, for almost 6 years with false promises based on provisional results. In the end, in 1753, he was abandoned from Fürstenberg, and Johann Georg von Langen had to face the mess of what was to be a manufactory. It balanced on a knife's edge that the whole project would have turned into a disaster. But Duke Charles wasn't willing to let go the massive investment and to be embarrassed in front of his ministers, who weren't committed to the success from the very beginning. The turning point was the arrival of Johann Kilian Benkgraf, who had served as the arcanist of the Höchst porcelain manufactory. He was recruited in summer 1753, and just a couple of months later, a functioning production facility could be established. Since then, porcelain has been manufactured continuously at the same location, carrying the well-known mark, the blue F, on ducal order. In contrast to other porcelain manufactories, Fürstenberg had little financial backing from the sovereign in the ongoing decades. Duke Karl wasn't the best customer of his manufactory in comparison to other princes of his era. The most extensive commission was the famous table service painted with landscapes and vedutas by self-taught painter Pasha Weitsch from 1763 to 69. Nowadays, half of the service remains in the collection of Her Majesty at Windsor Castle, after it was given as a gift and keepsake of her home to Princess Caroline on occasion of her marriage to the Prince of Wales and later King George IV. Fürstenberg wrote art history as the service's decoration wasn't painted after etchings or copper plates, but plein air sketches of artist Pasha Weitsch. And we are really proud that we have just this single plate in our collection at Fürstenberg. In order to operate profitably, the manufactory oriented itself towards the market and therefore, from its beginning, focused on tableware, especially services for the consummation of hot drinks. The remote location was not exactly conducive to popular success. This is why a second workshop for decoration and sales was established in the town of Brunswick in 1756. Today, we would call it a flagship store. However, Fürstenberg had a big advantage over the competition. The kaolin for the paste was mined next door in the Solling Mountains and made the manufactory independent of the Passau earth used by most other manufactories, which they had to cart over great distances. After 20 years of constant production, the manufactory reached the point of break even and started to make a profit. The range of tableware was limited to a manageable number of shapes, usually with only little relief ornamentation to provide plain surfaces for the painters, and flowers, landscapes, and birds dominated the decorations as motifs, as well as decors in underglaze blue. In addition, Fürstenberg offered a large number of vases and busts due to the fashion of the upcoming neoclassicist era. But the next crisis came with the Napoleonic Wars, when the Duchy of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel was annexed to the newly established Kingdom of Westphalia under the reign of Jérôme Bonaparte, Napoleon's younger brother. Jérôme showed no interest in the manufactory at first, as he preferred French commodities. But with Louis-Victor Gervereau, there was a skilled craftsman and very talented salesman in charge, and after persistent approaches, Fürstenberg received the title as Manufacture Royale and became a purveyor of the court. After the short Napoleonic era, which ended in 1813, Fürstenberg's activities were drawn more or less completely to a middle-class clientele. The result was a decrease in quality and a growing competition with powerful private enterprises, which were established in this time in Prussia, Silesia, Thuringia, and Bohemia. In 1859, the ducal era of Fürstenberg ended with the lease to private entrepreneurs. The first leaseholders did not last long, but others, more or less knowledgeable of the industry and the required skill set, brought rapid change at the end. At the end of the 19th century, Fürstenberg transformed into a public limited company in which, in addition to the financial backing of a bank and the tenant, porcelain merchants also became investors. Products were completely geared to the mass market with low-priced porcelain ware. Artistic quality dropped continuously. After celebrating the sesquicentennial of the manufactory's founding in 1897, the manufactory worked to reverse the trend of declining standards and to reconnect to its glory days of the past, as well as keeping up with modernity. Not an easy task. It was not an easy task for the always cash-strapped company. Especially during the hard times of the 20th century, as a limited company, Fürstenberg never received any stately subsidies. A turning point came in the late 1960s when the NordLB, the States Bank of Northern Germany, took over the shares. The manufactory remained in possession of the bank until 2019. And today, Fürstenberg belongs to the state of Lower Saxony, and it's a bit like being part of the ducal household again. At the turn of the 21st century, during the general crisis of the porcelain industry, Fürstenberg underwent a complete relaunch following years of stagnation. Revitalizing the spirit of its tradition as a ducal manufactory, the Fürstenberg brand has once again become a luxury label with international appeal. In addition to upholding traditional forms, the manufactory has been concentrating intensely on contemporary and innovative porcelain design. The new philosophy and redesign of the museum has been underway from 2015 to 17 in order to meet the brand's future aspirations as well. And so now I will take you on a virtual tour of the museum. The museum's rooms are spread over 3 floors of Fürstenberg Castle. The main approach of the new layout was the creation of thematic spaces in contrast to the typical displays one finds in museums, which are more like study collections. In our presentation, visitors find each room as a thematic area, which is explained in different aspects. It was not our aim to encyclopedically reappraise the history of the manufactory. It was more important for us to determine themes and stories that appeal to the public and relate them to porcelain. It's not about educating the visitors, it's about inspiring them. The design of the exhibition needed to do justice to the content and at the same time be future-proof, that is, flexible for future changes. The rooms were connected by a harmonious color scheme, which makes the museum appear more spacious overall. In addition, Each room was given its own character through special staging in order to avoid monotony. The number of exhibits was reduced from the old installation. The newly gained space now serves didactics. At the same time, the visitor's gaze is clearly directed in this way. Several hands-on stations are scattered throughout the exhibition, which visitors can activate. Touching porcelain in the museum and even being allowed to play with it regularly causes enthusiastic amazement among the visitors. In the center of the castle, there is a historical 18th century wooden staircase. It is an important architectural monument for the industrial architecture of this period. It was built when the old castle was converted into a manufactory around 1750. The timber frame construction received a more monumental appeal thanks to the whitening. Before the renovation, it was covered in a dark brown lacquer. Visitors surpass the cashier and walk along the hallway, where we put on an introduction to the history of porcelain in general. Then people step in the old polishing room, and this room deals with the founding history of Fürstenberg. The economic and political interests of Duke Charles I are discussed here. What did it take in the 18th century to build a manufactory? Where did the raw materials and the labor force come from? How did they get hold of the arcanum? Where does the famous F mark come from? All those questions find the answers here in this room. One step further, a small cabinet named after Johann Georg von Langen opens the main exhibition floor on the castle's first floor. The design demonstrates the maxims of the new installation particularly well. A single figurine group, the so-called coffee company, is staged as the central object, as the pivotal point. This group of figures is used to explain the two dimensions of porcelain art. On the one hand, there is the amount of craftsmanship that is necessary to produce it. This is demonstrated impressively and easily grasped by the arrangement of the individual parts. On the other hand, it is the artistic content, in that the figures on the opposite wall are explained in respect of iconography and iconology. In this way, the visitor can grasp that the group of figures, which at first glance might seem a bit kitschy, is to be understood as a work of art. In the Desauges Hall, which is named after French sculptor Jean or Jacques Desauges, who worked in Fürstenberg in the early 1770s, porcelain is presented as a historical document. The pot in its great variety is our leitmotif here. Using selected examples from the 18th century to the present, stories are told about the people who made or possessed the various coffee, tea, and chocolate pots, and what a pot can tell us about the habits of former times. The decisive factor here is the connection to the present day by incorporating contemporary designs from the manufactory. It is an important concern of the museum to include the manufactory in its interpretation. Fürstenberg is first and foremost a lively, producing manufactory that carries on its history until the present day. This continuity, now almost 275 years old, should therefore also be reflected in the museum. Thus, examples from the recent production are shown side by side with the historic objects. The adjacent Rombrich Hall, named after sculptor Johann Christoph Rombrich, is dedicated to the theme of decor. In the central black box, visitors discover a virtuoso installation. Fürstenberg decors from 3 centuries are brought to life by projection mapping on white vases. And here is a little impression of it. Excellent examples of decorated porcelain can be seen in the showcases, like this pair of potpourri vases with painting by Andreas Philipp Oettner, a German painter who was always on the go and who worked in several manufactories, mainly in southern Germany. There is a fantastic neoclassical amphora from the collection of Max Gerd Reichmann. I will talk a bit more about him later. Or flower paintings by Christel Ehli, a trained porcelain painter who worked at the decoration workshop in Brunswick until its closure in 1828. And a floor vase with crystal glaze from the 21st century. The next room, the Weitsch Hall, named after painter Johann Friedrich Pascha Weitsch, revolves around the theme of table culture, and there is a change in the presentation. Whereas previously individual objects or small groups dominated the vitrines and display, extensive table arrangement can be found here. The room begins with a staging of the courtly dining culture of the 18th century. Since the museum does not have an extensive service from this time, I have combined very different objects on the evidence of historical table plans. This invites you to take a longer look and discover. The service of the Margravine Amalie of Baden from the early 19th century conveys an extremely magnificent impression. A special feature is the completely preserved 9-part set of vases with elaborate paintings in sepia color. The service form 644 Schloss Fürstenberg, created by Hubert Griemert and Walter Nitsche in 1938, shows Fürstenberg's efforts to combine aesthetic tradition with the needs of modern functionalism. The present is represented on the one hand by the Blanc Gourmet series, which was specially developed for and in collaboration with top German chefs. On the other hand, the large mix and match table shows the possibilities of sophisticated and very individual combinations of very different shapes and decors. The display changes regularly according to season or reflecting a special exhibition. You may also call it the director's playground. Alongside, there is a hands-on station where visitors can create their own table setting and try out a wide variety of combinations. And sometimes visitors even feel like changing the large professional display, which was a bit irritating for me at first. But I regard it as a good thing. It shows people really occupy themselves with the idea. The next room, the Fallner Hall, named after sculptor Simon Fallner, is dedicated to the theme of form. Which aspects of porcelain production influence design? It begins with the principle of serial production, continues with the issue of functionality, and proceeds to the special material properties of porcelain. The highlight here are the cut open jugs, which seem to be frozen in the pouring movement. The visitors' workshop is the final and highlight of the museum. Here, employees show how porcelain is made. Visitors can have a look at the steps of the so-called white production, where the porcelain body is made and decorated. Ask questions and try out many things for themselves. There are also workplaces where visitors can paint porcelain themselves to create a unique souvenir. Here, the art of porcelain making really comes to life, and my co-workers are not only trained craftsmen and women, but also talented agents to seed the maladie de porcelain amongst our visitors. Another special experience is our study gallery. It was opened in 2018. In the large cubic display case, a broad cross-section of the museum collection is staged and thus shows its abundance. Of course, there's not enough space to exhibit our complete collection of about 25,000 objects. After all, apart from a few individual pieces, the range and diversity of our collection of 18th century Fürstenberg porcelain can now be seen in its entirety. The 19th and 20th centuries are represented with a representative selection. While the 21st century is embodied by outstanding individual pieces. One area is dedicated to our Society of Friends, where members show changing loans from their respective private collections. The Society has more than 100 members who support the museum not only with money, but engage with great enthusiasm in the planning of various events and projects. As a very special treat, the study gallery houses the famous collection of Max Gerd Reichmann. Although some objects were incorporated into the permanent exhibition, the majority of nearly 500 pieces is displayed in this large wall cabinet. Previously shown at the Museum für Kunst und Gewerbe in Hamburg, we were able to take over the collection as a permanent loan in 2016. The collection in total is stunning, with its large number of porcelains from the first 2 decades of production in Fürstenberg. The collector, who died in 2000, focused on tableware mainly. The dessert plates from a set produced for Charles I are to be mentioned. But there are some outstanding figurines, like these depiction of virtues by Johann Christoph Rombrich. The museum has 2 rooms for special exhibitions. However, spaces in the permanent exhibition are also utilized. Since the reopening of the museum, Schloss Fürstenberg, in March 2017, we have already mounted several special exhibitions. To introduce the, at that time, new loan and coinciding with the museum's reopening, the first special exhibition in 2017 was dedicated to Max Gerd Reichmann and his magnificent collection of early Fürstenberg porcelain. In fall of 2016, the manufactory introduced a new tableware series called Omnia. It was designed by the EOS design studio from Vienna and consists of just 4 different pieces: a large and a small plate, a bowl and a cup. The limited number of forms allows EOS to emphasize their design claim of reduction and minimalism, but without making any concessions in terms of aesthetics and craftsmanship. This is demonstrated particularly well by the double-walled bowl and cup. Omnia went on stage at the Vienna Design Week in autumn 2016 with a sophisticated art installation created by the studio and which the museum subsequently adopted. In spring 2018, we received the great honor to house and organize the Richard Bampi-Preis of the German Gesellschaft der Keramikfreunde. The prize was introduced on behalf of famous ceramic artist Richard Bampi to support and encourage up-and-coming artists. And I remember my nervousness because nobody knew how many and above all, what kind of exhibits the young artists would submit to the competition. At the end, we had everything from miniature objects to vast installations. In May 2018, the museum saw the opening of Keramics by Petra Weifenbach, a German artist who has a unique approach to ceramics. She doesn't form vessels or produce sculptures, but instead she uses ceramic fragments as pictorial elements. Thus, shards and disembodied pieces are acquire a new meaning through additional painting and drawing. 2018 was highlighted in the summer by the exhibition Porcelain Couture. The exhibition sought to address provocative questions like, what has a vase in common with an haute couture dress? At first, this comparison may seem arbitrary. However, porcelain and fashion have been closely interwoven since the 18th century. Both luxury industries often pursue common design ideas and deal with the same trends. The exhibition highlighted the resulting interactions in impressive presentations, thus immersing the visitor in the world of international fashion. The exhibition didn't follow a strict chronological concept. It was merely a kind of associative approach to the subject. Again, it was our aim to inspire the visitors and gain new interest by creating a surprising, entertaining, and sumptuous display. Plans worked out, and the number of visitors increased by 1,500 over 3 months, which is a pretty good outcome for our museum, which is in fact miles away from anywhere. After the exhausting year 2018 with 3 special exhibitions, the opening of the study gallery, several events, and a team starting to murmur that Mr. Director should be a bit more considerate of the capacity of the personnel, I reduced the speed for 2019 with only 2 exhibitions. The first, called Weser-Chinesen, or Chinese from the Weser Valley, was put up on the occasion of a newly acquired permanent loan. 186 pieces of a table service from around 1780 and all painted with chinoiserie motifs had occurred from a private collection. Of course, the quality of the painting is not at the top of its time, but it is most interesting to investigate the motives and to find out that they derive from 2 main sources. The Fürstenberg painters obviously used Meisen's Herold chinoiseries as a pattern, but as well they used French copper plates, for example by Jean-Baptiste Piedmont. It is my concern to have a contemporary artist every year at the museum to introduce a modern perspective on porcelain. In 2019, it was Cologne-based artist Uli Böhmelmann to create a room installation. Inspired by the castle's location, buffeted by the wind, and the surrounding landscape, she invented her work called Blätter or Leaves. It consisted of more than 500 individually crafted paper-thin elements which were floating through the room. It was a real tour de force to hang all the stylized leaves onto fine threads, but the result was stunning, poetic, and simply beautiful. The last year, of course, was miserable, like it was for every other museum. But after the first shutdown, and thanks to a generous private donor, it was possible to invite artist Kejona Stumpf to create an artistic intervention in our permanent exhibition. With In Dialogue, she juxtaposed her works to the historic objects. Concluding, I would like to give you a foresight what to expect this year. There will be from May on the exhibition Sense and Sensibility, Porcelain and the Five Senses. Together with designer Wolfgang Hartauer, I created a concept about the sensuality of the material, or in other words, how porcelain appeals to the human senses. There will be 5 individual cabinets constructed, each devoted to a respective sense. Inside, there will be an effective installation. On the exterior, there will be displays with objects and texts to emphasize. Just one example, hearing. The visitors enter the cabinet, take a piece of porcelain from a shelf and throw it into a bin. The crashing sound will start the installed sound system, and a symphony will sound, composed of porcelain sounds only, like the clatter of a cup on its saucer. I hope I was able to give you an impression of how we in Fürstenberg are committed and trying our best to awaken a new passion for porcelain. Thank you very much for your attention.
Christian, thank you so much for taking us through just so much work that you've done. I can see why you moved to only a couple of exhibitions, but I think you've just given us a really lovely overview of the factory, its production, and actually what you're doing today. And I thought there are a few things I particularly love, the projection mapping discussions and everything that you're trying to do. So thank you so much. We will have a time for questions. So please do write your questions in the chat. Christian, could I just ask you to, before we get to the Q&A, to just introduce our next speaker, if you could move to the next slide, please.
Of course.
Thank you so much. So for our next talk, which will be 2 weeks' time at the same time on Sunday, the 21st of February at 6 p.m, we're really delighted to be welcoming Oliver Fairclough to talk to us, who has been, as many of you know, the wonderful chairperson of the FPS and recently stepped down from that role. So we're really looking forward to hearing from him speaking on Sir Watkin's table and some work that he's been currently working on. So please do join us for that in a couple of weeks. But thank you so much. We've already had quite a few thank yous in the chat and some questions coming through as well. I suppose I love the projection mapping and that idea of the vases showing how the design processes work and that level of creativity, and particularly that seems to be something that you're really striving for, and the idea of playing with the porcelain and interacting and this haptic touch engagement of holding it. I thought it was really interesting. At one point, you mentioned this idea about not educating the viewer, but about inspiring them. And I'd love to know a bit more about how do you cater to the former audiences who do want that education and yet still bring in the new audiences through inspiration, because surely the two can go hand in hand. So I'd just love to know some of your thoughts on that.
Sorry. Of course, these two aspects work together very well. Just because our exhibition is not just entertaining, of course, because if you walk through the museum, you can learn a lot. With all the texts, you have a couple of hours to read, but we try to focus onto the greater part of the public. The main or most people coming to our museum are tourists. They come on an occasional visit, and they don't come to us with any specific knowledge about porcelain. They are more like blank canvases. And so it's our aim to start painting on those canvases. And for the experts, like us scholars and so on, they are very happy about our study gallery because there's such a great amount, such a great number of pieces to examine and to look at. But our I'd say normal visitors are very, very content that we don't have such such a vast number of objects in the permanent exhibition, because so the gazes are directed. They know what is the object to look at, and so the gaze is not it doesn't move away from the object you actually want to tell a story.
Thank you very much. That's really interesting, and I think as well the way in which you're explaining the creation and formation and the development of the factory over time. It's a complicated story, as you say, as well, actually. And I think that really came across in your talk. We've got lots of questions coming through. Let me see where can I start? I think I have to say, I feel like we all just really want to be able to go and visit in person. So if you've got, 200
You're all welcome.
people will be descending when we can descend, I think. So first up, we've got a question about the online collections. And of course, for so many of us in museums, the digital aspect, especially in recent months, has been really key. And particularly with something like ceramics, which, as you say, are so haptic, you want to see the whole object. We've had a question about, are all the pieces that are in the study collection, are they available to look at online? Or are you hoping to improve your online content, digital content? If you could say anything else on that, thank you.
Yeah, we don't have our collection in total online available, unfortunately. It's not manageable for us alone, but we are part of a greater network here in Germany called museumdigital.de, and there you can find a selection of objects from our museum. It's, I think, a bit more than 1,000 pieces made available through this platform, and we are constantly working on increasing this number.
Brilliant, thank you. That's
but it takes a lot of time, because we are just a small team.
And of course, it takes resources as well to really have that digital infrastructure. No, of course, thank you. A few more questions about what you actually have in the museum's collection. So do you have a lot of other porcelain from elsewhere in Europe? And particularly, we've had a question if you have any Russian porcelain in the collection.
No. So the museum was established as the Museum of the Manufactory. In former years, or from the beginning, it was actually part of the manufactory. So we just moved out of the whole manufactory structure just a couple of years ago with the redesign, and therefore the museum focuses on Fürstenberg only. And in our collection, we have maybe, I think, 10 pieces from other sources, but everything else is Fürstenberg. So no Russian porcelain, no French porcelain.
We'll let you watch. It's fine.
But that made our collection the biggest Fürstenberg collection worldwide, of course.
Exactly, no, of course. And it's interesting you mentioned that split with the manufactory. Does the museum inform any of those designs that are created there? We've had a question about, are you and your team consulting the manufactory? Are they looking at historical examples, or is it kind of very separate?
No. We are very, very closely connected, of course. So the manufactory is our main sponsor. So our money comes from it, of course. And when the manufacturer is working on any new project and they need some advice or have any interest, have we made something earlier, maybe in the 19th century or whatever, so then they come and ask us. And our collection is kind of the heritage of the manufactory. So we preserve the past of Fürstenberg, and of course for them as well.
Well, exactly, the two go hand in hand.
Yeah.
We've had a very particular question come through from Pat Knight, that they have a figure of Don Quixote signed by Walter Nietzsche, and did he produce a series in the mid-20th century? Do you know?
The Don Quixote by Walter Nietzsche is a single model. So it's just this model, but it was produced in quite a large number. It occurs from time to time in the art trade.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And we've had, I think, lots of people really interested in the manufacturing side, as well as what you're doing so wonderfully in the museum. In terms of what's being produced by the manufacturing, is that still kind of, you talked about at one point the shift to more middle clientele, is that still the case? Are they producing for hotels, for mass consumption? Are they embracing the contemporary design that you really are championing in the museum? Is it kind of quite a large range of what they're creating?
Yeah. So Fürstenberg, on one hand, is still producing historic shapes and designs, but I think it's most important to look at the modern stuff, the contemporary things Fürstenberg does. The manufactory devoted itself totally to contemporary design, as I showed in one of the first files. Just flipping back quickly. There was this, as you can see, tableware, modern tableware, but on the left picture you see side tables, furniture made completely out of porcelain. That's very special and rarely to find today in a European manufactory. And those are fields which the manufactories is going deeper and deeper into.
I love that's brilliant, the furniture. Gosh, it's probably quite heavy. I don't know. I'm interested about the weight of that.
I think it's about 20 pounds. It's movable. It's movable, and it's stable. So it's very useful, I can say from myself.
Thank you. A couple more questions about the aesthetics. We've had a question from Anne Anderson about, did the factory respond to wider trends like Art Nouveau or Art Deco that were going on elsewhere?
Yeah. So the manufactory existed throughout all these times. And of course, you can find in our study gallery examples from Art Nouveau era, as well as from the Art Deco era. Fürstenberg in those times was really middle class. It was not very special what they made. They made beautiful things, but it was on an average level.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to see, we've had lots of questions come in, but I think really if there are just so many comments of people thanking you, and again, I think everyone is just willing to be able to go and see for ourselves, and you know, sensory engagement as well. I suppose the last question maybe to end on is coming from Philip Anasevich, and I think a really great question to maybe end on is, what about publications? Have you got publications planned for the future? Do your exhibitions have publications? I think everyone would love to know more.
Mm-hmm. There are several publications about former exhibitions, and there is one 3-volume work about the whole history of Fürstenberg from its very beginning to the present day. So I really can recommend that. And I'm planning a publication about the exhibition which will take place this year. So Sense and Sensibility will see, a kind of publication to keep the memory of this, I think, quite ambitious project.
Yes.
Yeah, and in 2023, I'm planning an exhibition about porcelain and the art of gardening, and for sure there will be a publication as well.
Oh, brilliant. We've lots to look forward to then. We've actually had more questions come in, and we have a few more minutes. So if you don't mind, I think we'll...
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, we might as well get to it. So we've question come in about, you mentioned the Fürstenberg factory not receiving a kind of generous boost through royal patronage. So how did they gain an international kind of representation or international following if it wasn't through royal patronage?
Oh, they were quite good in trading their wares, even in the 18th century here in this region. So today, parts of Lower Saxony, Westphalia in general, so the central Germany was the main market for the manufactory, and they tied bonds with many noble families which lived nearby in this region. And so this was a market, and they started quite early to contribute to the bourgeoisie.
Yes, brilliant. And I think from what you said as well, they seemed to very early on change who they were kind of targeting as well, and expanding that way.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. Brilliant, thank you. And then lastly, we've had a question, slightly an extension, I suppose, of the digital question, but about social media. And the person actually says that they've visited and they absolutely love the Schloss Fürstenberg, but they know how remote it is. So are you trying to use things like social media to make the work more accessible, especially, I suppose, with the contemporary installations, and even just that projection video? I mean, I could watch that, again and again, I think.
Oh, in fact, this projection mapping is more than 5 minutes long. So I just showed you a fraction of 30 seconds to keep you curious. Now, of course, we have our social media strategies. You can find us on Facebook, on Instagram, of course. And last year we started with some programs, and we will prolong them this year. So last year in May, we had our first live stream via Facebook, and we want to do more. Currently, my colleagues are working on online workshops for children and pupils.
Brilliant. Yeah. That's fantastic. I can see how things would lend itself so well to that. So thank you so much.
So I just can invite you to join us on Facebook and Instagram, and just discover what we will make in the near future.
Thank you so much. Look, Christian, I feel like we should end it there, but I think you've brought all of us on this journey through the factory to what you're doing and your team, and keeping ceramics alive and shifting things, but also keeping that education and all of the detail there as well. So thank you so much for sharing the museum with us. I, for one, definitely want to visit when I can. I'm sure we're all sat here thinking the exact same thing. So a huge thank you, and a huge thank you to everyone who continues to join us. I'm not too sure, we had a huge number tonight, which is fantastic. Please come again in 2 weeks' time for Oliver's talk. And stay safe, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you all in a couple of weeks. Thanks so much and good night. And a huge thank you once again to Christian.
Thank you very much for this great opportunity.
Good night, everyone. Take care.
Bye.